I still in this book right here, volume, the Bible story, volume 1 by author S. Maxwell. We're in part 4. Stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Lot. And I'm going to go ahead and start part 4. Story 1. God finds a boy. Alright, we do have a pretty illustration. It says painting by Lester Quaid. Yeah, Lester Quaid. That's what it says, and it has the listing of everything. That's what it looks like. It has Mount Sinai up here at the top. Then it has Haran, the Tower of Babel, Nineveh, Ur of the Chaldees, and then it says, then it has on it the country of Abraham. When God called him out of Ur to the land of Canaan. And then it's got Sodom down at the bottom as a listing. And then the caption on it says, while Abraham was living in the hardened city of Ur, God called him to leave his father's home and go out to a land that God would show him. He obeyed without questioning. That's what it says. And this is part 4. Story 1. God finds a boy. Get all this stuff. Alright. It was about 100 years after the flood that God scattered the people who were building the Tower of Babel. We know this because a baby happened to be born just when who was given the name Pele, meaning division. For in his day was the earth divided. It is easy to count back to Arphaxad, to the boy born to Shem 2 years after the flood, and find the date. And now the people were moving away from Babel. Some did not go very far. One group led by Asher, Abraham's grandson, traveled north about 250 miles and founded the city of Nineveh. This comes up again in Jonah. Nineveh does. So you know how old that makes that place be. Another group went south and built a town called Ur. Still, others wandered westward into Europe, and many traveled east to India, China, Siberia, and perhaps across the Bering Strait into North America. Soon villages, towns, cities all sprung up all over the place. Industries were started for people needed tools for building, farming, and cooking. Somebody discovered iron ore and started making the steel industry. Somebody found copper ore and how to smelt it. Others came upon gold, silver, and precious stones buried by the flood, and soon Goldsmiths and silversmiths were making beautiful ornaments, such as some of which can still be seen today in museums. Boat builders began to make of ply, small crafts to ply on the Euphrates, then long and longer vessels to sail out to the unknown seas beyond the Persian Gulf. Sad to say, as the people became more and more busy, they began to forget God, just like their fathers before them, before the flood. Some even made idols and worshiped them. This is hard to understand, for Noah and his sons were still alive. Noah lived 350 years after the flood, and Shem 500. And one would think that the influence of these men who knew what God had done in years gone by would have kept the others true and faithful. But it didn't. No doubt these older men kept on telling how God had destroyed the world because of sin, and how he had saved them in the ark. But by and by it came too many only an idle tale. Nobody wanted to listen. As years passed, wickedness increased. Gonna do it again. For then people forgot God and they began to sin. 300 years after the flood, conditions were almost as bad as before. Look upon the scene. Looking upon the scene, God must have been very sad. Perhaps he wondered whether it would not have been better if the ark had never been built and everybody had perished in the gulch. But of course, he could not have let it happen, for he had not promised Adam and Eve in the garden that someday he would restore all they had lost when they disobeyed him. Had he not that said that the seed of the woman would bruise the serpent's head? Therefore, he could not let the seed perish until the victory was won. There was only one thing he could do before the world become totally wicked again. He must find somebody through whom he would keep alive the knowledge of his truth and his purpose. Somebody who would love him and be loyal to him always. Somebody who would stand for right, truth, and goodness in an evil world. Somebody who could bring up his children properly, and to see it that they too kept his law. Could someone make could someone like this be found anywhere in Nineveh or Babylon? For both cities were quite large by now. Where among all the people were there a boy upon whom God could depend to do what he wanted done? At last, his all-seeing eye turned towards that far-off city, Ur, known later as Ur of the Chaldees, where lived a man called Terah, who had 3 sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. The youngest of them, later known as Abraham, was a good lad and loved the Lord. Someone, perhaps his mother, had told him the story of creation and God's wonderful love of Adam and Eve in the beginning, and all the glorious joy and glory that were theirs as they walked and talked with him. He had learned how sin had spoiled everything and how God, through Noah, his own great 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 grandfather, had tried in vain to save. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times grandfather. That's a lot of greats. And then, of course, illustration down at the bottom of a lady talking to a little boy, and she's weaving. Or telling the story. And let's see. As again and again he listened to the old story. Abraham had come to love God and to decide that he would serve him all his days. It wasn't easy for him to come to the decision, for most of the people in Ur, including his own father, were already worshiping idols. There were idols even in his own home. So Abraham had to take a stand for God all by himself, and God loved him for doing so. For God was watching him, just as he watched every boy and girl today. And when Abraham made his great decision, I can imagine God said, "Here is the boy I've been looking for, a boy who will not fail me, a boy to whom I can tell my secrets and with whom I will trust my future of my plan. I can trust the future of my plan for the redemption of the world." For many years past, Abraham's brother Haran died, and leaving a little boy called Lot. Not having any children of his own, Abraham took special interest in his nephew. Then one day, when Abraham was grown to manhood, his heart still set on following the Lord, he heard a voice speaking to him, and he knew at once it was the voice of God. And God said, "Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee, and I will make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." Long-winded. King James. Suddenly a great Suddenly a great, no, suddenly a glorious vision spread out before Abraham. He saw what God was planning for him in the days to come. He saw beyond the walls of Ur to the ends of the earth. He looked beyond the present to the end of time. He saw himself becoming a blessing to all mankind. But this meant leaving his home and friends and his old familiar town. Would he go or would he stay? For a moment, all the future hung upon his decision. Then, of course, it has a little watercolor of Abraham. And then up at the top, it has the version of heaven. And that was part 4, story 1. And now we're going to go to the next one.